Well, you heard it. It's clowns to the left, it's jokers to the right, and here you are, stuck in the middle. At least it is with me. Aren't you lucky? But then to add insult to injury, we're not only stuck in the middle, we're stuck inside, and that's loving courtesy of the people who are afraid that if we were to step outside, we may accidentally run into death. They want to prevent us from having that fatal accident. So since we're stuck with nowhere to go, I think it would make sense to put things in perspective. And I can't think of a better way to do that than to let an ancient legend bear on our situation. It's a story that tells of a wealthy merchant in Baghdad who one day sent his servant to the marketplace. It wasn't long before the servant came back. He was white and trembling. And he said, "Master, while I was in the marketplace, I was jostled by a woman in the crowd. When I looked over, I noticed it was Death who jostled me. She looked at me ominously and made a threatening gesture. 'Master,' pleaded the servant, 'lend me a horse. I will ride away to Samarra. There I will hide and Death will not find me.' So the master lent the servant a horse and he galloped away in great haste. But when evening came, the master made his way to that same marketplace and noticed that Death was still mingling in the crowd. He approached her and said, 'Why did you bother my servant? Why make a threatening gesture?' 'Oh, no, said Death. 'I bumped into him accidentally. I was surprised to see him in Baghdad because I have made an appointment with him tonight in Samarra.'" Did you get it? I know you heard it, but did you get it? You see, if the story teaches anything, it wants to impress upon us the idea that Death has scheduled an appointment with each one of us. And now when you hear it, you think to yourself, well, that's really bad news. But I think it's actually very good news. It's very good news because if this story is in any way true to life, and Death has scheduled an appointment with us, that means that nobody dies accidentally. And that would go against the narrative that you hear in the news day in and day out. People in a mad frenzy and a panic trying to prevent us to go outside because Death could be hiding in plain sight. So there we are, we're now double guessing ourselves. Wondering whether we should go out now or later, we should go to one place or another. And I wonder whether Death will be in the crowd coughing, or perhaps she had left a thumbprint somewhere that we will touch, and that will prove fatal for us. If the story teaches anything, it wants to tell you that nobody dies by accident. The truth is that the day we're born, Death writes my name and your name on her calendar, schedules an appointment for us. So you don't have to worry about dying by accident. But then there's more to it. I think it is worth our while to realize that there is an infinite difference between what we're dying with and what we're dying from. You see, these days, when the doctors sit down to write in that little rubric that says cause of death, they write in virus. They put that down as a cause of death. But in writing that, they're actually making a mistake between correlation and causation. Correlation is just naming the variables that were there when Death came to meet you. Causation points to the real cause, that proves terminal to your life. Nobody dies from a virus. Nobody dies from a heart attack. Nobody dies from a stroke. You die with a virus, die with a heart attack, die with a stroke. That's what we die with. So we don't die from a disease. Instead, we die from a decision. Every single one of us, sometime in the course of life, has made a decision to separate ourselves from the one who is life. And in making that decision, we have taken life into our own hands. Death comes just as a sober reminder to point to that simple fact that whatever we called my life was never really mine, because I have no power to keep it. So you may die with something, but what we die from is a decision that we make in the course of our lives, that we would go it alone. And that death simply comes as the final verdict that you cannot have life without the one who is life. So here we are stuck in the middle between that with which we die and that from which we die. And it's hard not to wonder whether there is any way out here. And I really can't think of any way to try to find the answer to it than to look through the book of death and find an exception to the claim that death makes to take every single one of us. If you were to look into that book, the book of death, you'd discover there's only 4 columns running along each page. There's a column for a name, a date of birth, date of death. And then there's a rubric that is entitled current status. If you were to try to find an exception, whether anybody is there whose name is not under the rubric dead, I think a good place to start would be from to look for all these great names of people who have held the promise of life to their followers. You know, you go there and you look under Buddha, and there's a date of birth, date of death, and under current status it says dead. You go to Baha'u'llah, the founder of the Baha'i religion. There's the date of birth in November, death in May, and under current status it says dead. You look for Muhammad. There's date of birth, date of death, and there under current status in bold letters it's written dead. And then in the middle of the book, if you were to look with some care, there's a smudged entry. That's because that was the day that death cried for the first time. Under name, it just says Jesus. Name of birth, date of birth, date of death. But under current status, it says risen. And you notice that among that long list of millions and millions of names, there is only one whose status is risen. He's alive. And you realize that the difference between a man named Jesus and everyone else lies in this, that death has a hold on people who have life, but it cannot hold someone who is life. So being caught between what we die with and what we die from, looking for a way out, I suppose everything boils down to a singular decision that you and I can make before death comes for that scheduled appointment. And that is to answer the question, who will I live for? And here you want to choose the one who is life. Because even if death claims you somewhere along the way, he's the only one who can pry you from those cold, dead hands of death. and hold you through all eternity. And in the meantime, you don't have to hide from death anymore. And I'd say that's pretty good news. No, I'd say that's the best news the world has ever heard.